I got Cookie. I'm ready to go. All right, let's do it.
Discussion, like that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that taxpayer-funded hatred should be something that we allow in our schools.
Okay, bro, real talk though, like brother to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean black people are less. Factually incorrect.
Let's go.
SATs.
Already off to a good start.
Oh, they are?
Gotta be careful.
I'm Mina Durson. I'm a correspondent here at Vice News, and we're going to talk about education today. We tried to bring a very diverse mix of voices here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to represent every single opinion.
Which is why we've brought together, right-wing conservative talking heads
Out there when it comes to education, but we are really thankful for your time and for your perspectives. I also have 2 kids in school, so have experienced some of this from the parent side as well. So let's just start really broadly. What's the purpose of education?
I think the purpose of education is twofold. One, to help build and support the individual.
Okay, we have a former public school teacher.
But also help build and support society as a whole, because even though you may not have a kid in education, you pay taxes to public school, because we as a society depend on and need education for society to work.
I think the purpose of education is to educate and not indoctrinate. And I think that
Already off to talking points. C.J. Pearson, PragerU personality. I bet he in bed with PragerU immediately called it, Donnie. Retweeting Daily Loud. Actor Ben Stein says he misses the days when a large African woman was on his Aunt Jemima syrup bottles. Same, he says. Okay. Got it.
in a lot of ways we've strayed from that and the original purpose of what it's supposed to be.
I think it should be intelligence and character. I think you should.
Dr. Martin Gamboa. I don't see like an official account.
Be able to understand the world around you and understand who you are and your purpose and try to make the world a better place. I think that it has to be a mix of the skills, memorizing the formulas, understanding the world around you, but then also what to do with it.
And just to go off that, the idea that education, you have to balance the
Desmond Fembrini, private school teacher and learning specialist. I don't see a Twitter account.
importance of memorizing the quadratic formula while simultaneously addressing social and political issues respectively, so children have both the know-how, general knowledge, and also kind of self-awareness and character so they're able to develop their own opinions.
Yeah, I think that the purpose of education is to understand the world that you exist in and use that understanding as a means for creating change or even understanding yourself on a deeper level.
Hang on, what was her name?
As a mission is to understand.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to suss out the ops. MS5 researcher, aspiring surgeon, Lyquad National Hospital and Medical College.
The world that you exist in and use that understanding as a means for creating change or even understanding yourself on a deeper level.
I believe the purpose is simply just to prepare the individual to be successful in the society that they exist in.
Critical thinking, learn how to live out your full potential so you can be independent.
Sean Themia, educational activist. Oh, chief of staff for Young Americans for Liberty, recovering progressive. Oh, God. Seen on Fox Business, Newsmax, The Young Turks, with The Federalist, The Spectator, and The American Spectator. Nice.
And everything else really flows from there.
The purpose of education is to prepare children for the real life and also make sure that they are literate.
So I think the purpose is to raise the next generation of leaders. And when you think about what you want your leaders to be like, you want them to be knowledgeable, and you
And nothing comes up.
want your leaders to be like, you want them
Excuse me, come again. What is this? Is relevant? Okay, not relevant.
to be knowledgeable, and you want them to be compassionate, you want them to be self-aware, you want them to understand the best way to move forward, not just for themselves personally, but for their whole community.
Yeah, emotionally intelligent, like adults. That's the purpose of education.
When we talk about who's doing the educating, who should decide what's being taught?
Parents.
Oh, God, wait, who said that?
Who's doing the educating? Who should decide what's being taught?
Parents. I think that parents should have a huge say in what's going on in the classroom because it's their kids.
Okay. You're not an educator. Right? You're not an educator. You don't decide curricula. Okay? Now, I've said this so many times. If a parent has a problem with like historical revisionism, right, in history books, like Louisiana history textbooks that have a rose-tinted view of the Civil War era, right? I understand where like a parent should be able to talk to school boards about like the kinds of things we're teaching in class, right? Unfortunately, the majority of what we hear from parents right now is the ridiculous demands of getting rid of CRT, a curricula that is not in schools.
Not ours. As a public school teacher 15 years, I was always aware that these are not my children. We have to make sure that we're respecting parents and their beliefs and their values.
I think the Constitution agrees with that.
Yes.
Here in America, ranging back to the early 1900s, plenty of Supreme Court cases have ruled in that favor that it is the parents' right ultimately to decide a child's education, medical needs, etc.
I would push back though and say that there does need to be collaboration, right? I completely respect your idea of it is not our job as educators to put forth a belief in front of children, right? That includes not perpetuating parents' beliefs in the classroom as well. In my opinion, that would be keeping a non-biased viewpoint, simply presenting issues, and then allowing kids to decide for themselves.
I would
Spittin'.
agree that I think it needs to be a collaborative effort. The way that we decide curriculum in Texas is that work groups comprised of community members, educators, parents.
Where is that in the Constitution? It's not. What they're talking about and what they're misrepresenting is that there have been Supreme Court rulings on whether or not a parent has a right to pull their kid out of like sexual education classes or the teachings of evolution, right? Because of like religious beliefs, right? Or your kid having to like stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, like these kinds of rulings. You know, not whether or not they want their kid to be taught that, you know, slavery happened.
Even in some cases, students and public service officials come together to draft curriculum plans, and then it's ultimately decided on by our State Board of Education, which has a lot of kind of assistance from parents as well. So I think that kind of format can be really effective because it also empowers students to become involved in the fate of their education. And as a student myself, I think that that's incredibly important because our perspectives need to be heard as well.
The voices of parents need to be heard in that equation. But unfortunately, what we've seen recently is that parents' voices have been demonized in this process. You've seen parents who've criticized local school boards labeled terrorists simply.
Yeah. What are they being labeled terrorists for? For threatening to shoot doctors and school board representatives and teachers, you know, running into school board meetings saying that all of the people on the school board are pedophiles that are grooming their children into becoming like transgender, homosexual, neo-Marxists. Yeah. If you're doing that, yeah, you are fomenting terrorism. Yes.
For caring about the quality of their education that their child is receiving. These teachers are temporary caretakers. When they come back home, it's the parent who has to explain that this is this radical belief that was put in front of you. This was this idea that you've never been raised around, that parent now.
Okay, do that then. What do you think, like, lib parents don't have to educate their kids? Do you think that, like, black parents don't have to educate their kids on a proper context of like Civil War history, of American history? That already happens. It's just happening to people who are uncomfortable like with it not being like what they're raised with as like an American exceptionalist worldview.
Now has to explain. And at the end of the day, that isn't just confined to a classroom. Now it's bleeding into their upbringing, and there's only one person responsible for their upbringing, and that's the parents. It's not the educators, not the teacher, it's their parents.
That is patently false. No. For many students, teachers are their only role models. Just patently false. And it's this notion that like, this idea that like public school is the government parenting children, which it's not. It's government funds going to professional educators who are qualified in, you know, actually introducing new ideas and concepts and behaviors to children who are qualified to do it. There's a reason that like I advocate against the notion of parents doing sex ed for their children, like pulling their kids out of sex education, because they got a garbage education in regards to sex ed as well. We need to cut people off from this idea that, you know, parents are the best, most qualified people to educate their children. They're not. We all need to start over, okay? Some motherfucker probably think Homo erectus is queer theory. True.
I like the idea of the collaboration, and obviously parents' voices belong at that table. I also like the emphasis on students having a say in this, and also other people adults that aren't parents. I'm invested in that too, even though I don't have
Pedagogy is a fucking postgraduate certificate. You need school twice.
children of my own. And I hear what you're saying about having to, like, parents needing to confront or address, I guess, like what kids are learning at school. But giving kids the exposure to other ideas or other things that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise is, I think, part of what's going to help raise the next generation of people.
Yeah, there's a whole purpose of education, particularly higher education, right? Higher education is meant to, qualify you for a specific field of work. But the experience of college is to be exposed to varying worldviews. In K through 12, that socialization is the most important aspect. That's why group projects are so heavily pushed within school. Collaboration, learning how to communicate, learning how to cooperate. Dude's throwing daggers with his eyes. Well, I mean, he's a PragerU shill.
People that are able to look outside their own lived experience.
But I think that oftentimes those different ideas are presented in the classroom as a student as the only idea. When you're being taught that, oh, this...
Yeah, and what do you think it is at home? There can be dissenting opinion in the classroom. At home, there can't.
There's, this many genders or anything like this where you haven't been exposed to that in your own household. It's being presented as like the end-all be-all when it actually isn't. It's about educating and not indoctrinating. As long as that is presented as a counterpoint to, well, there's people who believe this, but there's also people who believe this, that's okay. The reality of it is that in most classrooms across the country, that isn't what's happening.
And to piggyback off of that, one side is labeled as a bigot, white supremacist, homophobic. There's a lot of parents in America that are Christian or, they believe in two genders, gender binary. And if you say that...
Right, there's a lot of people within America that do not have a proper education on things like sex and gender. Yes, we have failed like multiple generations that currently are alive today in proper education on these issues. And there is a effort to correct that course.
As a teacher, especially, you could be labeled as homophobic. So there isn't this unbiased classroom because there's one side that can't really be, as loud as the other side without risk of, losing our jobs even.
Well, here's the thing about it. You as an educator don't need to be loud. You've got plenty of parents who are the loudest people in the room. Silent majority my ass.
But you two are kind of the ones that brought in the conflict of like, there is an indoctrination going on and only one side, it has this opinion and this side is not allowed to talk and we have to be quiet. When really you guys are actually the loudest in regards to this issue thus far, right?
Right now, yes,
so,
in
yeah,
this room, yes.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the quiet. What I would say though is like, I do want to push away if possible, and I'd love for you to hear this, right? Is that idea of someone sees me and they go, oh, you're one of those that teach that there's 72 different types of gender. Desmond Fambrini, he, him, gender fluid, bisexual. My students do not know this because it doesn't come up because I'm a learning specialist and it's my job to educate and teach a curriculum, right? Now, if I'm asked directly by a parent or if there's confusion, oh, why do you wear makeup? Same reason why girls do, because it's fun for me. It doesn't need to be this very controversial, I'm gonna mess with this child's upbringing, they're gonna go home and they're gonna turn into a gender fluid and they're gonna think there's 72 genders.
I think that's a question you say you should go ask your parents about how they feel about that.
Well, so, okay.
Teachers are supposed to teach reading, math, science.
Yes, teachers teach. And if a student asks, why do you wear makeup? That's a teachable moment.
The things that are actually going to make them contributing members of society. Answering a child's questions about whether or not men or women should be wearing makeup or not is, I don't think, within that realm.
Okay, so you said science, right? So we're talking about a physical science, we're talking about human anatomy and biology here. So a child says, I thought boys could not wear makeup. I have an X and Y chromosome and I'm wearing makeup. I could factually answer that without indoctrinating with any opinion.
But it's in no way scientific, your answer to that question.
See? This is why the social sciences are so important. Of course you can. Biological males have been wearing makeup throughout the whole of history. Just because of this very short period of time where men aren't supposed to wear makeup, and even like contemporarily. Again, I need to bring this up every time. How come men are suddenly wearing makeup in the last 2 years? Ever since the pandemic, men have been wanting to wear makeup. Yeah, okay. David Bowie.
How is that not scientific?
I would say maybe cultural or it's a perception or an opinion.
So a social
but it's
science?
in no way scientific.
Anyone else? I am a chatty person, so I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to let's see if anyone else has something to say.
So I just had one question for you, because not all homes are are welcoming or open to
safe.
conversation or safe. So how do we balance that?
I think that what we're saying is that there's certain conversations that are not to be had with a teacher. And I think that the argument that a lot of people on the right and conservatives are making is that we just don't feel as if actors of the state should be having conversations that are taxpayer-funded conversations with children about conversations that have not come up in their own households. And
When was the last time you discussed mitochondria in your own home? Shut the fuck up. When was the last time you talked about Hamlet in your own home? When was the last time you talked about, like, you know, I don't know, a parabola in your own home? Shut up.
to that point, if you can't talk about God in the classroom, why can we talk about every gender under the sun, right? I think that...
Because that is different. Do you understand that these are different things?
That's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. If we are banning those conversations, we've banned those a long time ago, then how can we have these conversations just because they belong to a different side of the political aisle?
So I think we actually talk about God in the...
Because we have a separation of church and state, right? Because faith-based discussions don't belong in an educational environment. There is nothing, unless we're talking about like world geography, world history, or like, you know, cultural studies, right? There's no reason within a classroom, especially K through 12, that you would need to bring any of it up because it's not based in reality. You're the dude over here talking about science, and you're like, well, why can't we talk about God? Well, what the fuck does that have to do with science?
In the classroom all the time, right?
Yeah.
Who's taught religion? Who's taught world religions? Who's taught like history in the way that, you know, Puritans, like, and that's okay because God is part of the fabric of history and whatever else.
We talk about it from a development perspective. This is how Christianity originated. This is how Islam originated. We don't talk about like, this is what this gender is, and this is if you feel this way, then there's gender affirmation therapy, all those things.
I think you actually bring up a really good parallel of like, I feel comfortable and I feel like it is okay to talk about identity issues the same way we talk about God. Not indoctrinating anyone, not telling this is what you have to be or you have to believe, but saying this is something that some people believe.
But in the sense of gender identity, I don't see that parallel. How is that making someone more literate, more successful?
What I hear you saying is that learning about different gender identities does not make somebody a more considerate, well-rounded person, but learning about different religions does make you a more considerate, well-rounded.
I'm saying that is a part of history. I don't understand
Yes, and so is gender identity, dog.
where gender identity falls within what we should be teaching.
Religious history and God comes into play in terms of history, cool. But don't gay people and trans people too? It's not like I'm the first transgender person to ever walk this earth. Like there are trans people that were, and gay people who were part of major movements in this country, like from the civil rights movement to the feminist movement to, I mean, obviously Stonewall. Like, isn't that part of history too?
Let's just take a step back. So just show of hands. Who here thinks public school is the best option for kids? Okay. And who thinks private school is the best option for kids? Who thinks homeschool is the best option for kids? And then some of you guys didn't raise your hands at all.
It's so challenging to pick one right answer for that because essentially...
No, it's very easy. It is the only option. Look at the #1 country for education outcomes. What is it? It's Finland. What did Finland do? Outlaw private schools. There you go.
What you're asking is, who do you trust the most with your children? Who do you trust to give them the cultural values that I have and then fill in the gaps where I don't necessarily know the answer, but I trust that they're experts and are going to give my children the attention that they need in order to develop so that they can be a better version of themselves?
If I had to choose one, it's public school. It is the best tool we have to give everybody a chance at a good education, no matter where you come from, how much money you have. Public schools where not everybody...
Are we sure these are conservatives because they love getting publicly owned? Nice.
Thinks the same, and people are coming from all walks of life is a good like microcosm of that global experience where you can learn critical thinking skills and learn how to be a good community.
Outlawing private schools are just one of many things Finland does to get those results. By no means is it the one that fixes it. I know. I'm doing rhetoric, but yes, there are other things that Finland does, but the only way that they can do those things is if they decouple it from the private profit motive.
Remember, because not everybody looks like you or thinks like you.
Kali, you were shaking your head.
The cobbler's son goes to school with the factory owner's son.
Well, first of all, our schools are more segregated ever than our public schools, especially in blue states. New York and California have the...
That is a lie. That is a lie. That's not true. That is just not true. Why would states that are the most diverse be the most segregated? How does that even make sense?
Most segregated schools. And on top of that, we are in a place where our public schools are not safe, especially the last 20 years.
Okay, now I will give the caveat to people who want to homeschool their kids that if you, as a parent, feel that your child's not safe at American schools because of gun violence, understand, 100%. I am here for you. I get that. But if you were pulling your kids out of school because you were afraid of them becoming a homosexual Marxist, I'm not here for you.
And I just don't see why.
If like, if your child like is disabled or like struggles with being in like group learning spaces, right? My sister was like that. She had a lot of trouble being in like classroom settings, right? So she got her diploma, GED, like through a different path, right? It's not for everybody, but the excuses people make are nonsense.
Sending our kids to these environments where it's unsafe. We also used to be, because I used to be on the left, we used to be against the institutionalization of our children.
Educator and founder of Exodus Institute, a K-12 online school. We must take our kids out of these indoctrination camps. Oh, there it is. The communist brainwashing of America is planned and real from 2 hours ago. Every single time we watch a Jubilee or a Vice Jubilee Middle Ground or a Vice one of these panel debates, they have to go out of their way to find the most deranged right-wing propagandists every single time.
Problem with it is that it's become an environment where it's almost
Orville Redenbacher, 1985.
It's like the school to prison pipeline. We used to talk about that in the 90s. We're not talking about that anymore. And I think that's something.
Don't miss her next tweet, insane rapturous shit. Wait, I can't believe we are going through another Black History Month without reparations for Black people. Okay. Like, I could really use a check. My unemployment ran out.
Hey guys, it's Sydney again, and I'm just super pissed that we're in another Black History Month without reparations for Black people. Like, I seriously need that check. I cannot work for white people. Like, they like trigger me, and I have so much generational trauma that I can't be around them. Even though my dad immigrated from Jamaica and my mom's white, like, I can feel it in my bones that my ancestors were slaves. We're literally owed millions. Hey guys.
Tommy, go home.
Okay. Right.
Something that parents need to wake up about and America needs to wake up about, the institutionalization of our children.
Is it satire? I can't tell. She's calling Black people welfare queens.
Talk about the school to prison pipeline all day, every day. And I hear what you're saying, that it's terrible that there are parents who are
Chase, thank you for the gifted sub.
Sending their kids to schools that are not safe. However, what about the parents that don't have a choice? Like, I'm thinking about like the most marginalized community when I said public schools here, because I agree with you, the public schools have a lot of work to do to become the safe places where our kids are not in institutions where they're ignored or not giving the services they need. And also, for the people that don't have a choice and that is the only option their kids have, I just believe that's worth fighting for. That's why I said
absolutely. I'm a big advocate for school choice.
Well, why don't we just show
You can see the crazy.
That's why I said
absolutely. I'm a big advocate for.
You can see the crazy in those eyes. Oh my God. Yes, I too am a fan of school choice. Yes.
School choice.
Well, why don't we just show of hands? Who believes in school choice?
Can you just specify like what do you mean by that?
So that's where parents can apply the money that they pay to taxes. They get vouchers and they can put that into any school that they want. It's
absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is just a way to siphon needed funds for public education into private institutions, often religious ones, and charter schools that do not offer an adequate education to these students.
Very popular in red states right now, and a lot of blue states are against it. Especially
listen, if your selling point for a policy is very popular in red states, not popular in blue ones, you're not exactly going to sell me on it.
Actually, teachers unions are against it because it's taking money away from the public schools and creating more of a competitive market.
Right. That's why I wouldn't raise my hand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Sometimes with school choice, it gets a little bit tricky, right? My first class had, the first day, I had 25 students. By day 2, I had 19, because 6 parents switched out of the class because they saw me, and they were like, there's no freaking way, before I even got a word in.
As a parent, I would want to know, like, do you not think that that is okay or they're right to withdraw when they see you? Because ultimately,
No, I don't.
you're probably an excellent educator.
I appreciate that.
I have no doubt about that. But I think we get into muddy waters when we start trying to take that choice away from the parent.
Do I think that it is okay for a parent to see me and go, not around my kid? No, I don't think that's okay. I feel like that's really crossing the line, because you are, for lack of better words, discriminating.
I looked it up. Some of the biggest cities have the most segregated schools. Wonder why? Could it be that the cities are where gentrification is the most pervasive? Is it possible that these big cities are the most segregated because they are the areas with higher education of non-white people? Of course, there won't be segregation in Middle America because because no black people live there. That's what I was saying. The most segregated are the ones where there are already hyper-segregated communities.
Against me openly. That's like seeing a black teacher and being like, there's no way. It is the same. It is the same.
It's still the right of the parent to make that decision as to whether or not they want their child to learn from you.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Like, it's still that parent's right. Like, you can disagree with their motivations, their motives, their ideas,
Would you
but
say
it
that
is still their child.
This started around school choice. Even if you want to decide on a different learning environment for your kid, the people that do not have the option to send their child to a different place, the bar should not be so low. And that's my concern with school.
I think these conversations are very important, right? I think it's good for us to have like conversations with like on the ground people, like regular parents who have questions about this, and to talk to professionals about it, right? I don't think it does us any good to throw it in a blender of like, regular parents, activists, educators, and propagandists for right-wing media. I don't think that serves us any good, right? I would love to see conversations between professionals of like, what is the most ideal way we can do education? And then conversations between like parents and those people. But like, this blender is only like, I mean, this is content, right? I love it. I fucking love it. But like, this serves us no purpose.
School choice is that sometimes people think that if everyone flees to the suburbs, who is teaching in these schools where everyone has decided they don't want their tax dollars going to? And that's one of the big concerns.
Exactly.
The funding of education being the way that it's set up, it essentially makes it so that the people that are stuck with these as their options don't end up with as good a school, and everyone deserves to have their kid go to a good school.
Well, if there's
the cobbler's son goes to the same school as the factory owner's son.
School choice, they won't be stuck with those options. They can have other options. That's the whole point of that. Also, it is the school district's job to appropriately use those budgets. Most of the budget in the schools aren't going to the teachers. We got cafeteria workers, janitors, all of these people that are getting paid.
It used to be 9.
Yeah, no staffing for schools. What? That is not the problem with funds in education. The problem is, one, it's underfunded. Not that we're what do you want, cafeteria workers and janitors not to be there? Do you want these public schools to just be filthy? Do you want the kids not to eat?
Out of 10 people that were employees of schools and districts were teachers. Now it's 50-50.
Yes.
So there is some mismanagement of funds in this country. We actually fund.
Why would teachers be leaving the industry, I wonder?
Our kids really well.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Too many administrators.
Just to go back a little bit to like when you guys are raising your hands about the different choices, you raised your hand for homeschooling. Can you talk us through like why do you think homeschooling is the best option?
If we look at the history of this country, a lot of
Why are we giving this lady so much of a floor? I want to hear from this dude. I want to hear from this lady.
people were homeschooled. A lot of our founders were homeschooled. Like a
lot of our founders were homeschooled. I wonder why. I wonder why many of our founders were homeschooled. What kind of argument is that?
They only went to school till 3rd grade, a lot of them. And I think what has happened is parents have decided that the government is going to do a better job.
Yeah, lady, that was 300 years ago.
at raising their children and themselves, we have also come to a place where school is taking up the majority of our day. And we have this mistrust of parents that they can't educate their own children.
Yes. It's not a matter of mistrust, right? It's a matter of you're not an educator. You didn't go to school for this. You didn't get a degree. You didn't go into student debt to be an educator. You probably think that the word pedagogy is some kind of like child predator program.
And I think that that's wrong. I think that a lot of parents, and if you look at homeschool data, like my friend Phil right here, he's got 7 kids and he's homeschooling them all. And actually homeschool kids are turning out really well.
Famously, homeschool kids turn out really well.
I think you bring up a lot of very valid points, but I have to say, and I just want your opinion on this, I would never homeschool my own kids. And I want my kids to be smarter than I ever was.
Who hurt this woman? It's not a matter of hurt. It's who's paying her.
How am I going to have a child that is smarter and does better than I do if I'm their only teacher?
You grow alongside your child.
Okay.
I think as a teacher, I feel like I've learned the most in my life as a teacher, like more so than in college. And, you know, so parents becoming teachers is actually good for them as well.
Okay.
And even in the public schools, a lot of teachers are relying on the lesson plans. But speaking from experience, I got to give the credit where it's due. My wife does the homeschooling, and I've watched that process of her learning alongside, you know, to make sure when they ask these questions.
Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want, is people who don't know the material learning the material alongside the students. That seems like a great way of doing it.
Questions, I'm getting knowledge on the material as well so I can help you get through it. Nothing replaces that value, that bonding time that she gets to have with the kids.
I taught high school for 6 years and I quit. And I'm a stay-at-home mom with my own kids. So we're a one-income family. We're lucky enough to be able to live off of my husband's salary. Would you say that most homeschool families have one parent working?
I do think the statistics show that that is the case.
It's like the only way to do it well.
Pretty much. And, you know, another misconception, though, is that they think...
When I tell you I've seen this conversation in real time, to the point where a parent who thought this way was mad at me for allowing their child to just go to sleep without stress. So they came into school, assaulted 2 security guards, came into my room, grabbed him by the skin of his neck like he was a lion, and dragged him out of the classroom for letting the kids sleep in class. The fuck?
It's a matter of income, and homeschool families have to be rich and et cetera.
CPS, right there. Child Protective Services, this one. Get them.
I think the average homeschool family makes like $65K. So the reality is they're scaling back and making sacrifices for this lifestyle because they value what is coming out of it.
So not good, right? So if people are taking a less income in because they are terrified of public education, that is to the net. That is a net negative for the child's educational and life outcomes. What is the number one predictor of your social and economic success? How much money your parents make, your zip code. So why would you remove more opportunity? When we first moved to the U.S., my sister used to listen to my parents with CPS anytime. I used to threaten my parents with CPS anytime they forced her to go to bed. Yeah. Bedtimes are an unjustifiable hierarchy.
Oh, let's just say that for the people that homeschool isn't an option, what is for so many people it's not. I do not think that school choice is the way to go about that, which I know is a lot of people's answer to that.
Can we just get Sean in here? What are your thoughts?
Oh God, not the Young Americans for Liberty guy.
School choice gives people an exit ramp. You get to send your kid to a school that best fits
an exit ramp, right off a cliff.
It's what you think is best for their development. At the end of the day, it's kitchen table conversations about we've worked hard to raise a family. We want to spend our money in a way that best fits our child, best fits our family. And when you don't have school choice, you do make those trade-offs. There are
right, you want a hug box.
Real consequences there.
The school is considered one of those shared spaces, one of those last kind of shared spaces where you might bump into someone who maybe comes from a different background than you, has a different ideology than you. What do you lose if you homeschool and then you're not putting yourself in these kind of situations?
Socialization, a worldly, a sense of worldliness, the ability to empathize with people from different socioeconomic, ethnic, racial, or religious backgrounds.
What you lose is negative influences. One of the biggest things, I think.
Sorry, never mind then.
when it comes to homeschool is keeping my kids away from your bad kids. We've went and taken our children to pride parades. And you know what I mean? We've been there, we've been loving, and we showed support to the people there. But at the same time, we explain our views on the matter that we believe marriage is between a man and a woman. And
Right. So you showed happy people celebrating their lifestyles and their different ways of being that exist outside of what you're used to. And then you show how happy they are, and then you pull them aside, and you're like, Billy, we believe that this is evil. Look how happy they are. You want to be happy? You'll go to hell if you're happy. Keep that in mind.
And from experience and talking to people, I understand that a lot of people who choose that lifestyle, it is based on trauma. A lot of were molested or sexually assaulted as children. So I don't think it's okay for me to teach to my children.
Such an uncharitable reading. That is exactly what he described. We took our children to pride parades, and then afterwards we told them we don't believe in that. That's exactly what he said.
This is something normal we ought to accept when it doesn't progress society. We would not be able to procreate if everybody were to choose that lifestyle. So I think it's okay for me as a parent to say, hey,
just straight homophobic.
This exists, that exists, but this is our view on it, and this is how we want to present it to them.
Do you think it's somewhat problematic that you're going like, well, this is our viewpoint, that marriage is between a man and a woman because we can't move society forward with gay couples? Like, we have factually proven that incorrect. I can actually tell you that.
How? Look around. Queer people have always existed. Always. Society hasn't collapsed yet.
Gay parents, on average, make exceptional parents and do exceptional things with kids because they adopt, and they only adopt kids when they are financially capable, which actually makes kids of gay parents actually more successful and academically competent. So gay parents actually are very good at moving society forward, and we have the statistics to prove it.
Could that be a long-term solution, though, if a large population chose to choose that lifestyle? There would be
Right, you're doing well, what if everyone turns gay?
no children to adopt.
No one is choosing this lifestyle.
That's an opinion.
Okay, it's not
That's an opinion. Oh, dude, it's just straight up homophobic.
It's just.
Okay, sorry.
Did you choose to be straight, sir?
I've been teaching for 15 years.
So
and
have I.
will say that there is some kids
Wait, no,
now
let him answer. Let him answer. Shut up. Shut up. Let him answer.
that are going for that community that are doing it not out of a genuine, and there's pockets of them too. Like you'll notice like friend groups of girls that will all of a sudden decide that they're now trans.
The idea of LGBTQ being
just making shit up.
Trending, and the idea of teaching kids that being gay is a choice, those are two very different.
So I'll answer that. Yes, I chose to be straight. Absolutely.
So when you
Well, what a easy fucking choice then.
Can you tell us about it?
So you actually
you
could be attracted to me if you wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Okay, internalized homophobia. Never mind.
Let me explain. I have seen transgendered people who I thought were born female that were very attractive. I didn't know. Now, once I find out that that's not what you are, I am
Where do they find these guys? Where? Is there like a warehouse full of them just like in Los Angeles that Vice can just like, you know what, they're just making content over here. Is there a PragerU content mill? Kind of like that video we were looking at on the Chinese influencers where it's just like an office building and they have like fake studio setups and they train people on like how to be influencers. Is that what they do? Great job, Vice.
choosing not to pursue that. That's what I mean. So yes, you can be attracted to someone that is of another gender.
Let's talk about what do you think should be taught about gender identity in school? What do you think is being taught?
I want to go back to something you were saying earlier that's related to this about like you're seeing trends, and I am too, right? Last semester, when I was teaching, I had a trans kid in every classroom, and I was like, whoa, when I started teaching,
It was one in school.
there was none, right?
one
And
in
I'm
the school,
like, this is, wow,
And they
okay?
were really for it, too.
And
they, like, went for it.
And I'm hearing you that is something I'm seeing, too, in the classrooms. Fair, okay. Now,
Yeah, that's crazy. You know, so many left-handed people suddenly.
I'm not going to presume to be in the heads of those kids and to understand, like, what's real for them or whatever, but I will tell you this.
No, Mari, they said that they were trans.
Historically speaking, a disproportionate number of kids who are gay, who are trans, who are any of the LGBTQI, fill in the letters, right, didn't live to see adulthood. Maybe that's why we don't have an older generation of trans adults, because
I attended the funeral of a trans student last month.
a lot of them didn't make it. And so when I hear about kids like feeling comfortable enough to try expressing something where maybe they wouldn't be able to do in other spaces. And I understand that maybe that's not what you want for your kids, but I'm thinking about the most marginalized and vulnerable people. And unfortunately, statistically, for our queer youth, disproportionately they fall in that category.
Mind you, with the whole concept of school choice, I'm all for parents who agree with what you're teaching, sending their children to you. I just think ultimately it should be within the parent to make that choice.
Well, fuck you then. Well, fuck you.
What do you think should be taught in sex ed?
I think it should be health education, yes. I taught middle school and high school, and they started giving it to my students in 7th grade, and I have students come back to me traumatized because I think sex ed has gone away from what it was. There are some lessons, like for example, they have a lesson where the kids in 3rd grade in the New Jersey curriculum, there's
get ready for get ready for her to make some random shit up. Get ready for her to make some horrific random shit up.
some lessons, like for example, they have a lesson where the kids in 3rd grade in the New Jersey curriculum, there's a picture of a woman's spread eagle, and they're learning all the different body parts of the...
Wow. We learn anatomy. Again, every time I've heard this argument, what they are describing, because they'll never show what it is, what they just describe is anatomy.
The clitoris and the stuff, every child is different. Some are not developmentally ready for this or mature enough for it.
Could it be that they have parents who didn't get adequate sex education when they were in school and weren't prepared both emotionally and academically to describe these things to their children and prepare them for those classes?
I grew up with abstinence education.
That's pretty rough.
Where we didn't talk about sex ed until middle school, but mostly 10th grade and high school. But I think that middle school is far too late to be talking about sex ed.
Do they have do they think a white parent should have the choice to not send their kids to black teacher's classroom? What the fuck is this thinking? It hurts worse than other marginalized. It hurts worse when other marginalized groups still can't find solidarity. They asked that exact question to this dude right here, and he said yes.
And it's not because I think that second graders are, wanting to be promiscuous, but like having sex ed scaffolded because it is a preventative measure against sexual assault, often being done in the home.
Just because that happens in the home doesn't mean that we need to label all parents as not capable of teaching sex to their children and giving...
No, you're not, though. Demonstrably, you're not. That's just the facts. I'm listening to the way you're talking about this, and you're not emotional. You don't have the emotional intelligence or the academic background to be able to talk about these things. What you're advocating for is the lack of education. You're not asking for students who are homeschooled or, their parents decided to go with the school choice route to have education in a different model. You are asking for the deprivation of education for these kids.
Of course not, but teachers for a lot of children are the only trusted adults, and it is incredibly dangerous to remove teachers who are trained professionals to deal with these crises in the home from the situation, and that's just like a funnel for child abuse.
I think a huge thing that's missing in education in the schools when it comes to sex ed is consent.
Yes.
That's not being taught at all, to my understanding.
Weirdly correct take from the Young Americans for Liberty guy. Actually correct. That's the thing. They want it to just be about reproductive education, but they're also freaking out about depictions of anatomy. How the hell would you teach reproduction if you can't do that? But also they want health classes, but they don't consider that talking about consent, talking about gender is good for the safety and mental health of students.
I never learned it in schools. And that creates consequences when you look at the situations that are going on here.
I think that we have such a hypersexualized society. Obviously, kids are having...
Sorry, I'm still laughing at how she said clitoris. It made it sound like a fucking dinosaur. Yes. Welcome to Jurassic Park. And it's just a big labia walking across the lake. They do travel in herds. Near, 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 near.
sex younger, they're hooking up younger. It's just reality. I would rather those individuals, and also from a pro-life perspective, know how to have safe sex and preventative sex that prevents pregnancies than them to just go around willy-nilly just doing whatever they want.
So there's a lot of middle school.
Wait, what did he just say?
That are going on here.
I think that we have such a hypersexualized society. Obviously, kids are having sex younger. They're hooking up younger. It's just reality. I would rather those individuals, and also from a pro-life perspective, know how to...
Hold on. Teen birth rates, 1950 to 2020. What's going on? Let him cook Gremloe. He's talking about safe sex ed. Okay.
have safe sex and preventative sex that prevents pregnancies than them to just go around willy-nilly just doing whatever they want.
So there's a lot of middle schoolers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are getting pregnant at earlier ages, and we're starting to rank like the highest nationally in terms of middle school pregnancies. And that's because a lot of middle schoolers are, again, like you said, like getting sexually involved earlier, whatever
it's the Cardi B music.
Whatever it is.
Oh my God, this jackass in the back. Yeah. Yeah, WAP is the reason that, we're seeing more, teen sexual engagement.
It's happening, and we need to be able to address it, and students need to be able to be equipped with the skills to understand how to have safe sex. If parents aren't having those conversations at home and middle schoolers are getting pregnant anyways, like why can we not include that in the school?
In no way that has to be a joke. If I'm going to be as cynical as possible, which I usually am, he also mentioned that we have a hyper-sexualized society, and he is a PragerU guy. So talking about like modernity and like its degeneracy of the decadent West, under modernist cultural approaches, then yeah, like he's a fascist.
So they have some
It wouldn't
form
surprise
of
me if he
information.
meant that.
Again, it just goes back to the fact that so many of this issue is just not black and white. It really is 50 Shades of Gray, because like there is just no one-size-fits-all approach to the way we educate our children.
What age do you think
Easy,
sex
thank you for the
ed
gift of sub.
should be taught in schools? Like starting at what age?
Probably at some point during secondary school, because if we're talking about it scientifically, kids need to understand that science is a body of knowledge that we're building together. This is what we currently understand.
Scuffed Christian Walker.
And about human anatomy.
As far as like actually getting into intercourse and the details of all of that, in my experience, I usually
Okay, seriously, these people are so fucking stupid. I don't want to hear this dumbass pro-life shit. I don't want to hear about homeschooling. They aren't trained professionals. Their only understanding of safe sex is using protection from top-of-the-hour ad breaks. You son of a bitch.
at least start giving that understanding around 7, 8 years old.
I think that sex
Top of the hour
ed
ad break.
is
Hey, how you doing?
a
Fuck you.
lifelong discussion, and it starts, as soon as you can communicate. Now, that doesn't mean that you are giving a high schooler's curriculum to a 3-year-old, but I'm already talking about consent and using proper anatomical language with my children.
What explains people having sex at younger ages? Also, is it necessarily good or bad, or is it morally neutral for younger folks to be having sex? Either way, promoting safe sex is probably a good thing. No, promoting safe sex is a good thing, but we don't have any information saying that younger folks are having sex at a younger and younger age. Teenagers have always been fucking each other. That's always happened, right? What we see is a reduction in birth rates within teen years. That's the important factor. It doesn't matter, right? Is it morally, repugnant that teenagers are having sex with each other? I mean, that depends on your point of view. We don't want that outcome being the spread of STDs or teen pregnancy rates or sexual abuse. We don't want those bad outcomes, right? Teenagers used to get married for fuck's sakes. Yeah, like this timeline right here, right? 1950. They were getting married at 16. My grandmother married my grandfather at 16. Is that what we want? It's legal in 11 states to marry a teenage girl or boy, so long as you have the parents' permission. I'm less concerned with like teenage sexual engagement with other teenagers, so long as it's consensual and safe. What did our parents tell us? I know you're going to do it. If you had like decent parents, I know you're going to do it. Just please be safe. We're also a lot more closed off as a society. I would argue that a lot of people are having less sex. Mindsight newsreaders researchers have found Generation Z is less likely to be having regular sex than their parents and grandparents. At least 1% has linked this phenomenon to increasing rates of social isolation in the current loneliness epidemic. An Illinois bill, if passed, would help fund campus mental health forums proposed in an earlier state law. Second-generation Asian Americans are having the talk with their parents for the first time, and emotional support animals haven't gotten their due, declares one psychiatrist. Read on. Apparently, there's a sex drought in the U.S., and COVID isn't to blame. That's not to say that the pandemic hasn't contributed to this drop in desire, but as recently as 2018, nearly 25% of Americans reported having no sex at all in the past year, according to an essay in New York Magazine. In that same time period, only 39% of Americans reported having intercourse once or more a week, decrease of nearly 12% in just over 2 decades. And in case you were expecting an aging population of boomers and Gen Xers to be the case, think again. It's the Zoomers, also called Gen Z, born right in the turn of the millennium, who were romping a lot less than their parents and their grandparents. Why? Why is the question? My theory, if I'm going to use materialism, a little dialectical materialism, it's capital. Yes, Mari, it's capitalism. They're overworked. They're exploited. They are alienated. They're isolated because they constantly have to be working, right? We're talking about an aging population of Zoomers. I think the youngest is what, Mari, like 17 for Zoomers? What's the youngest one? Probably like 15, 16. We're talking about people who are going into the workforce, especially if you're in Iowa, where the age of work is being lowered. 12 is the youngest? Damn. Never mind.
And that's where it begins and it ends in adulthood.
I think as long as it happens in a way such that, to the point you were making, that like kids are being protected, that's what I would say we prioritize.
I would say go back to the way it was when I was in elementary school. They said
you're like 20, okay? You're like 20. When you were in elementary school, we hadn't even invaded Iraq yet.
The boys and the girls, and the girls watched a video about their period and all these things. The guys watched another video. Yeah, it was health class. And then we didn't talk about
1997 to 2012. Gen Z, or Gen Z, they can also be 10 to 25. Okay.
sex education, the actual contraception, all of those things until high school.
I think we need to separate health education from sex education. Health education should...
They are one and the same. Also, it would benefit, like, AMAB students, right? Whether they're cishet, whether they're cis, gay, whatever the fuck. It would benefit everybody if we all had an equal understanding of, like, health class instead of separating them, right? I understand we're a puritanical society and we, want to separate the sexes for these education, but it would unironically help if dudes knew about periods.
Be lifelong. No sex ed for now, the way it's being taught in a lot of these states.
Let's talk a little bit about other things that fall under the responsibility of what teachers do in the classrooms. What is CRT?
Critical race theory in reality is this complex legal institution that relates race to all of the institutions of America since its founding and since its birth. And it's something that I've never learned about in my classroom. I don't have any friends that have learned about it in their class.
Keep in mind, for those of you who are like coming in late to this, she is a high school student.
It's something that's often taught on the graduate level or the undergraduate level. So I think that it's kind of not a great term to use in reference to conversations surrounding K-12 education, because it's not actually something that's even on the docket for consideration.
That was a perfect description.
Yeah, I know. She nailed it.
I could not have done a better description if I tried.
It is in our schools. I saw the lessons.
Yep, there it is. Actually,
that contain critical race theory in California.
It said the words critical race.
It said the words critical race theory.
And
yes.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong, because some states have implemented CRT into their curriculum. It means different things for different districts. So this is about to be a very complicated conversation.
So in my district, and this is in California, they're requiring a class called ethnic studies in order to graduate. And in the class,
that sounds like an excellent course. I would want to take that.
They were taught about critical race theory. They were taught the definition. They were taught to analyze school policy through critical race theory. And they were taught how critical race theory is beneficial.
Whoa, being able to analyze policy through a lens of a framework that is both equitable and has diversity in mind. Whoa, fucking crazy. Historical analysis.
To analyze the U.S. It's basically this idea that every institution in America, every institution, that interaction that you have.
I also had to take that in fucking college.
has some sort of element of race, and usually there's a hierarchy of oppressed versus oppressor. And there are kids in America in K through 12 that are being taught that, and I'm so tired of people saying that's not happening when it is. And then when I expose it, I'm being called racial slurs and names for exposing it, and I'm like, come
I'll take making shit up for views for 500, Alec.
on, guys. Like, so I think we need to stop saying it's not being taught in America and change it to should it be taught in America, because it is. It is. There are teachers that are teaching this.
So there's a recent bill that was passed in Texas called Senate Bill 3, and it completely revamped Texas's curriculum standards and basically eliminated all requirements for teaching of history education in Texas that relate to diverse perspectives. So teachers can go through the entirety of K through 12 education without ever talking about slavery as an institution, even though it's thoroughly ingrained into just the history, just the basic facts of America's history.
My understanding, I don't see the banning of slavery being taught in
It's
Texas.
not the banning.
Yeah.
The issue is that it's no
'Cause
longer.
I know that bill.
It's
yeah.
no longer required.
I know
and
that bill, and I know it also states that you're not supposed to teach it in a way that causes mental anguish.
So it
Right. You can't account for that. You can't account for the mental anguish of kids who were told that it wasn't the Civil War, it was the War of Northern Aggression. Sorry, you can't account for that shit. These are upsetting topics. They also didn't want to teach about the Holocaust. There were people within the Texas Education Board saying that we need to have a both sides perspective of World War II.
NBC News obtained exclusive, secretly recorded audio of a school training.
We are in the middle of a political mess.
The director of curriculum, Gina Petty, offers an example for teachers. Balance books about the Holocaust with an opposing view.
Yeah. What would be the other side of the Holocaust that we teach, guys?
Make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has opposing, that has other.
How do you oppose the Holocaust?
And what's the end result? This.
First at 11, it's a video that's been viewed more than 5 million times. Empty library shelves at
This is in
Middle
Florida.
School, taken by a substitute teacher who says he's at a loss for words.
Empty libraries. You don't have to set them on fire these days.
does not ban it. It doesn't ban the talking of the institution of slavery, but it does create a loophole for teachers to never touch on the topic at any point in a child's education. And that is something that is happening. And it's something that is happening to peers of mine. It is something that is happening predominantly in communities outside of, I guess, my home city of Dallas, but having traveled and having talked to students across the state of Texas, I can confidently say that there are teachers who are not teaching very key facts of American history because critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all
It's called DIE.
These different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is.
Yeah, Texas also decided to refer to slavery as involuntary relocation.
And I think at the end of the day, the big thing here is that let's teach Black history. No one on the right is saying, do not teach Black history, do not teach.
That's just a patent lie. Oh my God, what a thing to get back to it from. Hang on, let's walk it back for a second.
Critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all these different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is. And I think at the end of the day, the big thing.
Who's being divisive though? It's not libs, it's not leftists. If anything, leftists want better, more comprehensive understanding. It's you, dog. It's you. And the three people on this side.
Here is that
he's
let's
so
teach Black
confident.
history.
Well, he's media trained because he's a PragerU actor.
No one on the right is saying, do not teach Black history, do not teach slavery. If we forget those lessons of the past, we're bound to repeat them. But what we're also saying is that stop being vindictive towards white people for being white. No one alive today was a slave.
No one's doing that.
And no one alive today owns slaves. And so for white children to sit in a classroom and be blamed for sins that they themselves did not commit is wrong. For Black people, for Black children to sit in a classroom and be told that because of the color of your skin, well, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're really not going to go that far because the society hates you, and then you have all of these
No one's saying that.
structural barriers preventing your success. That is also wrong. That is not less.
The perpetual projection of the victim narrative. The cynical weaponization of identity politics. Gaslight, obfuscate, project.
Lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity, and I think that is what schools should be about. You can't create the next generation of leaders if they are never capable of seeing themselves as leaders, right? And I think like that is what CRT, unfortunately, in some ways, it does to young children of color.
What CRT means to me is obviously really different from what it means to you. And when you were saying before, like kids are being anguished, I am not for kids feeling guilty about being born in the body they were born in. That's not what I taught.
What
and
did
I
you
wasn't.
teach?
I mean, what did I teach? Well, for one thing, I taught about slavery. For another thing, I taught about like the ripple effects of slavery that we're still feeling today. In no way saying that people of color are less than or can't be, or no, not the opposite. Saying like people have persevered through things that I myself as a white person will never understand.
To really make this micro, the way I see it is there is no reason that kids of a certain age, right, because it's different teaching to a 6-year-old and teaching to a 17-year-old or in college, shouldn't learn about the history of slavery, the history of redlining, the history of Italians being lynched in this country, et cetera, looking at the facts and looking at some of the horrible things.
Hey, finally some fucking Italian representation. Yeah, fuck you.
That have happened so we can learn from it. That is a totally different conversation than when you've got instances like in Cupertino, California, where you have 7 and 8-year-olds who are being sat down and said, okay, time to do a privilege exercise.
That's what happened in my
Let's write out, where you are on the power prism, because that can create.
Whoa, teaching about, systemic racism and its ripple effects throughout history, and then applying that in a application and saying, well, what ways do I benefit from a system that prioritizes one particular group of people? Is there a way that I can better understand that? Oh, well, hey, let's try this little test thing. Let's actually, map it out. Whoa, crazy.
Situations where students have warped views of themselves, especially if they're young. And I don't think it's appropriate because of the emotional impact it can have on folks.
They hate speaking the true.
People are actually being sat down being like, if you're white, you're an oppressor and you're bad. That is not okay. That is not CRT. That is not critical race theory, and that is not culturally responsive teaching.
So it's not necessarily being blatantly said, but it's being implied over and over again.
Okay, there is definitely a way to teach CRT without it putting anybody down. But it's like, hey, just so y'all know, if you're interested, there's different types of racism. There's the idea of racism as you treat someone differently because they're a certain color. And yeah, you could be racist to a white person if you don't like them for being white. Now, there's also systemic racism because we took a whole bunch of slaves from another country and brought them over here. But with that said, right, there's different types of racism here. And you can expose yourself to different ones at different times. But you don't have to make anyone feel bad. You just say the statistics the way they are. You're not saying one person's good, one person's bad. You just go over the definitions.
How should we be teaching race?
Well, I don't think we should be teaching white privilege in the classroom.
But teaching about race, like if you're...
You can't have conversations about race, ethnicity, systemic racism without talking about white privilege and white supremacy.
Designing your ideal, setting.
Yeah, I think.
How do you think?
And that's why they're so against all of it, because they understand if you even have a historically accurate interpretation, if you have a historically accurate teaching of these things, then you have to have all of it. It's one foundational pillar among a series of pillars that talk about history, especially in this country, right? Because it's not exclusive to America. Like American imperialism and American chattel slavery was like a global project, and to a point still is. Being white is all about power. How can you not teach the racism? Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, they'll hyper focus on one thing, and if you say, well, it's a broader teaching, they'll say, well, yeah, don't teach any of it then. That's the thing they'll never admit. It's like, we don't want this taught, period.
Race should be
Is that because you think it doesn't exist, or because they can't handle it, or
I think
what?
Again, when it comes to the privilege discussion, that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that
Again, you're not capable of having those conversations.
Taxpayer-funded hatred should be something that we allow in our schools.
Okay, bro, real talk though, brother to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean black people are less. Factually incorrect, right? So
what is white privilege?
White privilege is the idea of white people may have benefits that fall in a societal structure. Because they are white, they have advantages, not such as, for example,
I'm not under threat of being killed by police. my name on an application, you know, my name's Austin, it would be more likely to be accepted for an interview than a name like, I don't know, Trayvon.
If you send out a resume and you make one name a white name and the other name the classic.
What's a white name?
The white name would John, for example, right?
I know Black Johns.
Okay, no, here.
Yeah. And you can talk to people within black spaces about how some of their parents literally gave them white names for that very reason.
Hear me out. Let me finish, okay? We did a
Yeah.
study.
Like, Mari, you and I don't get followed around stores.
I didn't do this study, but we did a study where basically it was sent out 2 different resumes. They were the exact same.
Okay.
Right? One was given a classic
My name is
white
Khalil
name.
and I'm black
the
to
other
the
was
mouth.
given the name Jamal.
Okay.
The white name got
they're literally
2
talking about it.
times more callbacks.
And
right?
I disagree with what you're
but
saying.
the
in that
idea
sense.
of white privilege.
I disagree with what you're saying. They are citing a study. I disagree with what you're saying.
Right? The idea that somebody that is white may have an advantage does not inherently mean you are teaching a black individual they cannot accomplish great things. That is completely separate. So we're talking about fake biological science and social science. We're not even in the same building at school right now.
Well, again, in regards to these like audit studies about like what is a white name, it's not necessarily that the name itself is white. It's that the perceiver, the person that is reading the resumes, for some strange reason, feels like when they see a white name that they are on their team, or that there are positive stereotypes associated with people being white. That's what we're talking about when we talk about white privilege. Is that okay? If Oprah goes into a store, people might not assume that she can afford the things in that store because she's a black woman, even though she is Oprah. But if someone was white and goes into the same store, some people, because of their own racial stereotypes, might believe that they can afford it. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about white privilege. It's the sort of systemic benefits that you get from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But
Right. And those values, because of the societal structure and the historical racism that exists within our history, permeate throughout society. Values, privilege blind spots, actual like practiced privilege. These things exist everywhere. It's almost like we don't live in a fairy tale that you were told in Schoolhouse Rock.
call it privilege when the reality is, let's say you take the white person who would be considered white trash. You would get the same result from them. So I don't think you can necessarily...
Wait, what?
You get from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But to call it privilege when the reality is, let's say you take the white person who would be considered white trash. You would get the same result from them. So...
Not in hiring. Not in hiring. Not in, like, being harassed in stores, right? Followed around stores. The discrimination that you will face as a white trash person, I don't like that term, but, you know, if the... Listen, if the busted-ass Adidas fits, wear it. That is along a class level, which that's a whole other conversation, which I wish was actually in school.
I don't think you can necessarily assume that that's because of race, and definitely can't call it systemic because a person...
Oh my god, I love this. Oh my god, that's a cute emote. Oh, that's so good.
Decision to be discriminatory.
See, I walked into a jewelry store with ratty hair, with a ratty pair of cargos and an anime t-shirt with my Puerto Rican friend who was dressed business casual. I'm Asian American, and they came up to me first. Yeah, it's based on class perceptions of like your ability to like, do you belong in that space? Doing overtime. We here at Amazon are not offering overtime pay. Thank you, Aries, for the 100 biddies.
Should be taught to our children.
Right. And
should it be, and should we be telling black kids that you're going to get discriminated against because of the color of your skin?
You already, as a person of color, have the talk. That is something that exists within these groups already. Equipping them with a broader knowledge and other students who may not experience it is essential to overcoming those disparities. The problem here with this conversation is you are having a talk with someone who does not want to fix those issues or even acknowledge that they exist.
with loans, with redlining, blah, blah, blah.
There is a way to teach culturally responsive teaching without being narrow-minded, but it's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Even if you talk about the systems in place that privilege different groups at different times in different spaces, I'm not saying that when you teach CRT, when you teach about the history of this country that has privileged certain groups and not privileged black people, I think it's important to acknowledge that black people have persevered throughout that. There's so much excellence.
I thought racism would
I think that
ended
you
with
do all kids a
Obama.
disservice when you say, okay, the history of black people in this country or the history of women in this country is that they were oppressed the whole time and they weren't resisting. And then the Civil War happens and, the slaves are freed and the black people just stopped resisting, economic injustice until the Civil Rights Movement. That is not the case of history in this country. And so I feel like it's very important if you're teaching about, race in this country, it's about—
I thought Kylie Jenner ended racism. No, you're thinking of Ariana Grande.
Resistance. It's about resistance to the power structure that suggests that some people deserve to get more if they work hard than another group of people if they work the same level.
And not just resistance, but resilience.
You mentioned history, and a lot of you are educators. I'm just curious, what do you think should or shouldn't be taught, when it comes to U.S. history in the K through 12 environment?
So I think it's just this really unbalanced way that
What shouldn't be taught? Revisionist history, American exceptionalism.
they're teaching it right now, especially the ones that are proponents of CRT. That's creating this narrative that it's all white people to blame.
Grem, my dearest Grem, just lie to your children so they think that the world is against them personally, and they spiral into existential crisis. Too based.
When there was so many people involved in the transatlantic slave trade, the British were actually the ones that stopped it and used their own resources to stop the slave trading ships from continuing. They went to Africa to stop them. Hey, stop bringing them to the coast because we're not buying them anymore. And so this idea that I just feel bad for our children because they're not being—
What? Yeah, the prime example of why you should not let people who do not have an education background homeschool their kids. Like, right here. This is everything.
For our children because they're not being taught it in a perspective that is holistic, basically.
And even to this day, there are slaves in Libya held captive by black people. So this is not a white and black issue.
Yeah, but if we're going to talk about the difference between post-colonial slavery and chattel slavery, these are very different historical contexts.
But even with that said, I think leaving a public school—
Also, like the fucking, black people actually were the ones that sold black people to slavery. Just historically not true.
System, even my peers, when we talk about this, we left with the idea that black history is slavery and Jim Crow. And we're rarely talking about the Reconstruction era, the amount of senators and politicians we had post-slavery. It was just so many things that we did after slavery that we're being told we can't do today somehow.
Yeah, it would be great if we could have an accurate telling of African-American history, American history in schools. That would be great if we could do that.
That is just asinine.
There's no conservative in America who's saying don't teach slavery in the classrooms, but if you're going to talk about slavery, to his point, let's talk about Madam C.J. Walker. Let's talk about George Washington Carver. Let's talk about all these black people who have done some really incredible things that—
Also, you're describing the handful of people that are talked about during 1 month of the school year.
In spite of quote-unquote systemic racism and all of these things, have achieved. Let's talk about Barack Obama. Let's talk about Kamala Harris. Why is every conversation that we have to have about black people in the classroom about us being in chains, downtrodden, and having no hope? That's a problem. And Black History Month, it's American history. Let's talk about that too. Those are important inspirational stories that are—
but here lies the problem. If we want to dissolve away the idea of only doing African-American history within 1 month, we would have to do what the, they, them, genderqueer, lefty, communist Marxists want to do.
Are not taught in the classroom.
Do you think that the fight against CRT is hurting the efforts for more diversity and inclusion?
I don't want diversity and inclusion.
But you said
we already have that.
What I mean by that is
don't worry, guys. Yeah, we already have those things.
You said you want more like Black stories of hope and success and like all of that. That's what I mean.
But that's unfortunately not what
that keeps
CRT
being
is.
funneled.
Yeah.
I know.
That's actually
saying.
exactly what CRT is.
I think what's really clear
God,
is
they're
there's
so
a
dumb.
lot of big opinions on education, across the spectrum, and really thankful to all of you for sharing, your perspectives, where you're coming from. Some of you said it wasn't like this when you were kids. 20 years ago, school was really different. Maybe you couldn't even imagine having some of these conversations. So just want to pose the question to you, and where do we go from here?
I believe that we have to recontextualize the way that we approach education as a society, and specifically how we've kind of started to use education as a political tool. At its core, education serves society. It needs to be a collaborative effort, because if education serves society, society should be investing in education.
We as adults have a lot of work to do, and it's both at kitchen tables and school boards and forums like this. Obviously, literacy is a part of that, and I think there are other parts of that too, but the only way that we can move forward is if, instead of just talking about what do we talk to kids about, I think we have to first get better about how do we talk to each other about this.
I think we have to recenter education about actually preparing young people for the real world and acknowledging the fact that we're not going to have a one-size-fits-all approach that works for every student across America. We have no room and no time, frankly, to teach all these divisive things because we have urban literacy rates that are down in the dumps. When those
Urban literacy, he says.
kids learn how to read, then we can talk about gender theory, CRT. But until we have children who are proficient and above a third grade reading level, and majority of those kids in cities like Chicago and Detroit, then we don't need to be
Dude, just say what about black on black crime? Just say that. Just say it. I know you want to.
even having a conversation about whether or not students should be learning about privilege in schools.
The number one policy thing that I come back to that we must do to improve K through 12 education is to put in school choice at a universal level. It's far too overdue. It will incentivize the public schools to fix a lot of the problems that they have. It'll put the power back into the parent to get their child an education that best meets their needs. And I do think that if we're going to build the best generation of young people, then we should start with teaching them tolerance, kindness, and active listening before we get into racial privilege theory, gender privilege theory, etc.
I think that it's so important to get back to critical thinking and understanding that the way that we raise the next generation is also, not necessarily staying fixed ourselves. I think you were saying that, your wife is learning with the kids. And if we continue to learn about, hey, how do we do this better for ourselves? How do we treat each other better? The more that we do that, the better that we will be able to collaborate with people we disagree with, the better that we'll be able to make a curriculum that actually does, speak about the excellence that you're able to do if you, continue to challenge yourself and strive and push forward.
On this panel, a really huge set of diverse opinions. There wasn't really a bad guy. It was, we all wanted the same.
Oh no, there was three of them. There was three of them. Surprised that the Young Americans for Liberty guy didn't say too much crazy shit, but there was definitely three bad guys.
Same thing at the end, we just had different ways to get there. So I just think the collaboration is really what I'm taking away, because you can collaborate with anyone.
I think we need to make sacrifices for our children's future and prioritize them a bit more today. Aside from that, if you choose the public school route, I'm all for the collaborative effort, but what that needs to look like is parents showing up to the PTA meetings, showing up to the school board meetings, knowing and being inside the classroom and being actively involved, regardless of which route you take.
I think we've put too much faith.
The solutions are so simple, yet they offer overly complicated, backwards ass shit responses to them. Yeah, or just, instead of a solution, more of the problem. As are always the solutions of, reactionaries and neoliberals. Oh, is there a housing crisis? Let's make housing less affordable. That'll fix it. Oh, is there a cost of living crisis? Well, let's get rid of entitlement programs. Let's get rid of social safety nets. And, let's, make kids eligible at 14 to, go into the coal mines because they yearn for them anyway.
Into the education of our children in public education when we should be doing more of that ourselves. And we need to make sure that we put more power into the parents and empower them to take control of their child's education.
We just need to stop burning down the house. I truly believe that we can save public ed if we stop arguing with each other and start pouring more resources and like really buckling down to say.
I think we could save public education if we stop pretending like these reactionary astroturfed movements have any bearing, have any credibility.
Save this thing that really in turn saves us as a society. We can do it. We just need to stop chasing all of these like boogeymans that we are just like kind of seeing in the media just to polarize everybody and make everybody so angry. Like, we need to stop that and like save what we have, because what we have can be great and we need it.
Okay, I think that will do it for us. Thank you all so much for taking your time and for sharing your opinions and being.
Ooh, some of y'all can keep them to yourselves though. Holy shit.